With over 4 decades in the industry and dozens of acting credits under his belt, Jim Carrey has had a long and illustrious career, but the famed actor recently announced something that shocked us all. He's retired from acting for good, and it'll be years before we fully understand how big of a loss this is, because Carrey changed the face of comedy back in the 1990s with a string of successful films including Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, and my personal favorite, The Mask. And what set him apart was that he was a classic comedian with a very physical comedy style that you just don't see all that often anymore. We're living in an era where people talk more than they act, so it's pretty unlikely that we'll see the likes of Jim Carrey again anytime soon. But that still doesn't change the impact of his legacy. In fact, it just makes his career all the more important to film history, because this is a guy that's literally done it all, from his famed comedic roles that left us rolling on the floor all the way to his more serious performances like in The Truman Show. Carrey has gone from iconic role to iconic role, never missing a beat in between. But that's not to say that he's proud of every role he's ever done. Surprising as it might be, there are a few roles that Carrey happens to regret, and it turns out that he's especially apologetic about one of his more recent roles. Jim Carrey can no longer support his performance in Kick-Ass 2, and that's got me thinking about a lot of things, because Carrey hasn't been especially active since the 2010s rolled around. He'd never really been able to replicate his success in the 90s, so when the news broke out that he'd be appearing in the sequel to Kick, a film that parodied superheroes way before it became the trope that it is today, I for one was pretty excited, because it had been a while since I'd seen Carrey in something good, and the fact that he'd play an anti-hero in the film made it all the more appealing. Carrey always played the lovable goofballs, or just all-around good guy, but he hasn't really gotten the chance to play someone truly complex. And no, the number 23 doesn't count. It was horrible, and I refuse to acknowledge its existence. Moving on, me and a lot of other Kick fans were hopeful about his inclusion. It seemed like it would give us something fresh and new. And to Carrey's credit, he absolutely killed it in the role of Colonel Stars and Stripes, perfectly parodying the trope of the hyper-masculine, super-patriotic, self-righteous superhero, and bringing some much-needed comedy into the role as well, which should have made it just what Carrey needed to relaunch his career. Except for one big problem. Kick 2 was poorly received, at least when you compare it to the first film. A lot of fans, myself included, felt like it had all the style of its predecessor, but none of the substance, and most critics seem to agree. So Carrey didn't really get the chance to revamp his career the way that he might have hoped, even though he was probably the best part about the movie. Maybe I'm just a fanboy, but seeing Jim Carrey back on the big screen in a new role was enough to make me buy a ticket, and it made an otherwise bad movie seem halfway decent at the very least. But regardless, the movie failed to gain the same success as the original, and perhaps that rubbed Carrey the wrong way. Although, Carrey's been in plenty of bad films. Yes, I know, the number 23 is one of them. I'm still pretending it doesn't exist. But for real though, it's not like Carrey has the perfect filmography. So why did he single out this role as the one he regrets the most? Well, if you want to understand that, we should probably talk about why the movie was criticized. The movie seemed to glorify violence, which is putting it mildly. I mean, the first Kick movie wasn't exactly Disney material. It had a few too many broken bones for that, but it still didn't take things quite this far. And there's more. The movie didn't just depict violence, it seemed to downright glorify it, because again, it was all style but no substance, which meant that we got to see all of the hardcore violence playing out in the action scenes, but there wasn't a single moment where the impact of this violence was addressed. So that must have been weighing on Carrey's mind. But wait, didn't he know how violent the film was gonna be before he signed on? The answer is yes, but it's also more complicated than you think. The Sandy Hook shooting gave him a change of heart, and the timing of the tragedy must have given Carrey whiplash, because he had only just gotten done with filming the movie, only to find out that a tragic school shooting had claimed the lives of 20 children. Just let that sink in happened for a bit. Yeah, I can see why Carrey started to have misgivings. It's not like he could have known what was gonna happen, but traumatic events like that can change the way we think about the world, and it was at that moment that he decided he was never gonna appear in a movie that had over-the-top violence ever again. The cost just seemed too high. So even though the character he played in Kick 2 never used a gun, only ever pulling it out to intimidate others, the fact that the film depicted violence as something cool and exciting just did not sit right with Carrey anymore. And he's not alone either. Plenty of people have realized how big of a role Hollywood plays in glorifying violence, and they're all coming together to do something about it.
I'm here tonight to blow the lid off it, to be the whistleblower. I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. It is the secret symbol of the Illuminati, and you're a part of it, and it is the all-mocking tongue.
Carrey's quietly started a wider anti-firearm movement in Hollywood. He tweeted out his opinions on Kick 2 way back in 2013, and a lot has changed in America in the following decade. Gun violence has gotten so bad that it's become impossible to ignore, especially when so much of this violence ends up taking the lives of innocent children. And as it turns out, hundreds of other writers, actors, and directors signed a pledge last year, vowing that they would reduce unnecessary violence in films and try to portray it more accurately.
For years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms have been, when they get out there in the woods in a circle naked and they decide these things.
So, in a way, Carrey started an entire movement. He took accountability for the part he played and was willing to admit his mistakes, which just goes to show that he's not just a great actor, he's also an amazing person all around. And besides, the role he ended up disowning wasn't exactly his best. Carrey's performance in Kick 2 just doesn't match his past roles. And I'm not trying to disrespect the guy here, because if you look at it from a regular point of view, it is a solid acting performance that fits the role perfectly. But we're talking about Jim Carrey here. The guy has more iconic roles under his belt than I have hair on my head. So even though Colonel Stars and Stripes was a decent character, and Carrey clearly put the work in to make him come to life, it just doesn't measure up to the rest of his legacy.
Don't get me wrong, Jim Carrey is a great character, and I was lucky to get the part. I used to be a guy who was experiencing the world, and now I feel like the world and the universe experiencing.
Rather, it just seems like another nothing role, which is to say, a role that people would have probably forgotten about if he hadn't used it to raise awareness. I guess we can take solace in one thing. Carrey's had a full career, and he's never let it get to his head, and even the prospect of a comeback wasn't enough to make him abandon his ethics. That's why Jim Carrey will no longer support his role in Kick 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.